Welcome, everybody, to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Today on the show, Anthony Richardson returns, and probably Michael Pittman, too. What does that mean for the Colts passing game? Are you certainly going to be sitting Drake London this week? Haha. And are the Raiders actually a bad matchup for Tyreek Hill? We'll discuss it all on Fantasy Football Today. Adam Azer, Jamey Eisenberg, and Heath Cummings. Woo! Week 11. It's crunch time, guys. I need your best analysis this week, okay?
I need first to know that the hat that Jamey is wearing, it's going to baffle me for the entire show. So I need to know what this logo is.
Any guesses?
I can't. No.
It looks like, no, I have no idea.
Let's see if the audience knows.
Okay.
First person to get it right is in the podcast. No, you're not. But see if you can get it right. In the meantime, we'll give you some players we love and players to avoid. Jamey, who do we love this week?
Start of the week is Bo Nix. Just excited about the opportunity for him taking on Atlanta. We know it's been a very good stretch of games for, opposing quarterbacks against the Falcons. And he's done a nice job, obviously, in 4 of his last 6 games, over 20 fantasy points. I was impressed with what he did against the Chiefs, going into Arrowhead and scoring 20 fantasy points there against a really good defense. And I think he's just going to continue to use his legs as well. At least that's the hope. 4 of his last 6 games, he's either got 60 yards rushing or a rushing touchdown. And so I think that will come into play also against Atlanta. So good matchup, playing well. I think it's a week, where we can certainly use some help at that position. And I like the setup for him. He's the top 7 quarterback for me this week.
Falcons giving up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. It's good stuff. They've allowed 14 touchdown passes in their last 6 games. How about you, Heath? Who do you love?
We were talking before the show, and you said I should say Aaron Rodgers because I am higher on him than everybody else. And then I said, no, I'm going to say Jacoby Myers because I'm a little bit more higher on him than everyone else. But then I decided I'm going to say Drake London.
Oh, okay.
Because it does seem like a lot of people are getting away from him because of Patrick Surtain, and I understand that. I am not. He's a number 2 wide receiver for me. And we were just, I was just kind of going through the game logs and realizing there have been a lot of wide receivers who have been starting wide receivers against the Broncos over the last 6 weeks. I mean, remember the Zay Flowers scored like 200 fantasy points against them. The Panthers, both Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker, topped 13 fantasy points. Jacoby Myers had 13 fantasy points. Cedric Wilson had 13 fantasy points. I'm not entirely sold that with as good as Darnell Mooney has been this year, the Broncos are just going to completely forget about him and have Pat Surtain follow Drake London around. So I am still starting both of those guys this week as number 2 wide receivers, not as the top 5 guy that London's basically been.
I believe the Panthers game, if I'm not mistaken, was the one Surtain missed with the concussion.
Could be.
I think you're right. It's the issue is not all these guys like Zay Flowers didn't get shadowed by Patrick Surtain, right? I mean, he didn't.
And I'm not sure that Drake London will.
Right. That's your point, Heath, is that he's just going to stay to a side and take away one of their guys.
Because of Mooney. All right. So where do you rank?
They're both 16 or 17. I do have London 1 spot ahead of Mooney. But I think we shouldn't overshadow how good Darnell Mooney's been this year. In total fantasy points, he's wide receiver 8 on the year. He's been extremely productive. So you just decide you're going to take London away. Darnell Mooney might have 6 for 102 touchdowns.
Yeah, one thing I like about London, and same thing with McLaurin, who maybe I think he has a tough matchup tonight. They get so many end zone targets.
Yeah,
it's an amazing role that they have, especially London. Just seems like Cousins throws to him in the end zone all the time. Most of his touchdowns are kind of short yardage. Okay, so Jamey loves Bo Nix. He's sticking up for Drake London, and Jamey, who's the player to avoid this week?
Drake London. I also have him ranked as a low end number 2 receiver. I haven't completely downgraded him like I have some of these guys with Surtain. I'll go with Evan Engram. He's coming off a game with 10 PPR points, so not awful in the first game with Mac Jones, had 5 catches. The thing that concerns me, though, is Detroit's defense against tight ends has been absolutely insane. They just do not give up production to the position. And I think what we'll see, from this defense is this may be a absolute blowout. with going on the road, going into a bye week for Jacksonville next week, Mac Jones starting again, this could be the last game for Doug Peterson. I just would try to avoid, and this goes for Brian Thomas. If you can avoid Jaguars.
Okay, we got a lot of Milwaukee Brewers guesses.
Yes, that is correct. It is, and somebody said it correctly. Exactly, it's the City Connect Milwaukee Brewers hat. So my 12-year-old, his little league team is the Milwaukee Brewers. So we won. We went to the championship game last night. I was walking out the door to walk the dog, and I just grabbed it and I kept it on.
That's fantastic. I did look up the area code, so I was guessing it was something Milwaukee related. Adam, I don't know if you can remember this from this far back, but whose bobblehead did the Milwaukee Brewers send me? Because I talked so good about him.
Oh man, who was that? I don't remember.
The mayor of Ding Dong City.
Oh, what was his? Who was that?
Travis Shaw.
Oh, I never would have gotten that. Travis.
I have a Travis Shaw Brewers bobblehead.
The mayor of Ding Dong. We had a lot of fun with the Ding Dong term on the fantasy.
It was Dongtown. We call them something different. The mayor of Dongtown, I think.
Mayor of Dongtown. Okay. All right. So
I also purposely left the shades open, so see if I have Dave.
Yeah, that'd be good. Heath did not give your player to avoid, did you?
Najee Harris. Absolutely awful matchup on the ground. The Ravens by far the best run defense in the NFL. Najee has one game with more than 2 targets in his last 5, so you can't really count on him catching passes. I think it's going to be a great week for Russ, a great week for Pickens. Maybe even like Jaylen Warren might do a little something in the passing game. I don't want to start Najee at all.
Okay. Now, if you have any questions about your games on Sunday, you know where to go. 11:30 a.m. Eastern. You come to youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. We have a live stream from 11:30 till just about kickoff, about 12:55 p.m. Eastern. Also, CBS Sports HQ beginning at 10 a.m. You get your football coverage there. You get your fantasy coverage, you get your betting coverage, all that stuff. But either HQ at 10 or youtube.com/fantasyfootball today at 11:30 or both. We'll see you on Sunday. News and notes. All right. Anthony Richardson's going to start for the Colts, and it looks like it should be his job rest of season. Take it with a grain of salt, but that's kind of what they're hoping for here. They're at the Jets. It's the first game we're going to preview, so we'll get to that shortly. Gardner Minshew is going to start for the Raiders. It's going to be Desmond Ridder, and they were like, nope, it's going to be Gardner, right? You're looking at me like it's not.
Yeah, that must have. I actually missed that news. It's great news.
Let me double check. I'm pretty sure.
No, I'm not saying. I think it probably is true.
Yeah. Okay. So they went to Ridder, and then they were like, "Fool you!" We're going back to Gardner Minshew. So he's starting Week 11 at Miami. Trevor Lawrence is out this week, but actually Doug Peterson optimistic that Lawrence could be back after the bye. So that would be Week 13. They're at Detroit this week. Sam Darnold was limited with a hand injury, and they're at Tennessee. I think he hurt his hand. He hurt his hand on Sunday. Aaron Rodgers said he wants to play next season. Was not exactly 100% all in, but said he kind of indicated he wants to play next.
When was the last time he was?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Brian Robinson Jr. is going to play tonight, Heath. Your thoughts on the Commanders' backfield now against the Eagles?
Well, we say that's a lot, but I liked it a lot more when it was just the backup than I do when it's both the top 2 backs. I think I have Brian Robinson ranked as RB 25. I would start him over Najee Harris. I would start him over Austin Eckler. But I don't really want to start him. I don't think it's a particularly good matchup. He's going to be sharing with Austin Eckler and, for that matter, sharing rush attempts with Jaden Daniels. Great flex, bad RB2.
Would you start Josh Downs against the Jets or Brian Robinson Jr.?
So I have Downs in full PPR projected for 11.7, which is 1 point more than Robinson. So Robinson in anything but full PPR, Downs in full PPR.
Najee Harris actually missed practice, so he got hurt. It's not a shock that he missed Wednesday's practice. We'll keep an eye on. He got hurt last week. He came back.
And I should say, I was just kind of poo-pooing Brian Robinson. I would definitely start him tonight over Najee.
Okay. Aaron Jones was limited. That's a good sign for his availability this week. Isaiah Pacheco, unlikely to play this week. I think it was kind of interesting that Andy Reid didn't just rule him out. Not that he's going to play, but maybe he's closer to a return than we thought. or maybe it's nothing, but he's unlikely to play this week at Buffalo. That's Pacheco. Tank Bigsby missed practice. Wide receiver news, Devontae Smith is going to play tonight. Amari Cooper was limited. We know Keon Coleman's out this week. Juju Smith-Schuster could be back this week, so that Kansas City-Buffalo game could have Cooper and Juju in it. Devontae Smith missed practice, or Devontae Adams, pardon me, with an illness. Michael Pittman practiced in full. T. Higgins was limited. Oh, come on, welcome back. Hopefully you come back, T. Higgins. We want you back for this game at the Chargers. The Broncos designated Josh Reynolds to return from IR. Does not mean he'll be back this week, but he can be back anytime in the next 3 weeks. DK Metcalf practiced in full. Saints wide receiver Cedric Wilson Jr. was limited in practice. Tight end Dallas Goedert's going to play. So good injury news in the Washington-Philadelphia game with Brian Robinson Jr., Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. Dalton Kincaid missed practice. Sam Laporta, I think he limited in practice?
Did not practice.
He did not practice. Okay. Sam Laporta did not practice. George Kittle did not practice, but right now they seem optimistic about Kittle playing. Isaiah Likely, he was limited in practice, so he could be back this week. And Hunter Henry was limited in practice. Washington, one bad thing for Washington is they were pretty thin. They're pretty beat up at offensive tackles. We look at offensive line. So we'll see who's active tonight. Detroit could be getting left tackle Taylor Decker back this week. Jets left tackle Tyron Smith. But in the Colts-Jets game, both left tackles are going to be questionable. Jets and the Colts, both of their guys could be questionable. Seattle offensive tackle Abe Lucas has been activated from the PUP list, so he might play this week. And good news for the Saints, center Eric McCoy is trending toward playing this week. Big news on defense. Kyle Hamilton missed practice, Baltimore's superstar safety. So another reason why Russell Wilson and the gang could do well. And L'Jarius Sneed missed practice. So for those of you who listened to yesterday's show, Sneed not practicing today, you have my permission to start Justin Jefferson against the Titans. Colts defensive tackle DeForest Buckner missed practice. That would be a big deal. They are a much better pass rush with Buckner than without him. I mean, they're terrible rushing the passer without Buckner, and they're actually pretty solid with him. If it's a coincidence, I don't know, but he's obviously a very good player for the Colts. And that's pretty much. Oh, and edge rusher Khalil Mack missed practice for the Chargers. I think he barely played last week. That's pretty significant. It's been one of the best defenses in football going up against one of the best offenses. We'll see if Khalil Mack's able to play.
As the Milwaukee representative today, you continue to leave off the defensive injuries for the Packers. They're fully healthy coming off their bye week with Jair Alexander and Evan Williams back, the safety.
I am sure there are other defensive injuries that I've missed. So if I do, please let me know. But
I can only speak for the Wisconsin contingent. So
okay.
Paying attention to the Packers.
Thank you. Representing your home, your adopted hometown. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with one question for each game, and then we'll get into it after this on Fantasy Football Today. All right, folks, here we go. One question for each game. We have 7 games on the slate today. First one is the Colts at the Jets. Is this a bounce-back game for the Jets offense?
Yes.
It certainly should be. I mean, you've seen some up and down performances against the Colts. Like Josh Allen did not have a great game against them, So it feels like this is the type of defense that Aaron Rodgers typically has done well against. Mm-hmm. So I think he's a low-end starter. Like I would start Bo Nix ahead of him, Russell Wilson ahead of him. I still like Stafford slightly better than him, but that's a close one. I do think this is a Breece Hall game. Hopefully he gets going in this matchup. But how can you feel confident in Aaron Rodgers right now? That's the question. So do you want to start him? Probably not. Would it surprise you if he's got that 21, 22 point game? That's, I think, where he's going to live on a good day.
Yeah, I think like last two games before last week, the reason most of us pretty excited about him last week is because he had 5 touchdown passes in his last 2 games. He had a terrible game. He's playing a bad defense. I'm starting Aaron Rodgers. I mean, still agree 100% on Bo Nix. I would also start Russell Wilson ahead of him, but it's their 9, 10, 11 for me.
Yeah, I didn't like him last week because I think we haven't been giving the Cardinals defense enough credit. Mm-hmm. The one thing though about this is like their bye weeks coming up for the Jets. Like I Like, you can't have a good feeling about it. That's the problem. You just can't have a good feeling about it. Like I think that's awesome. You have him ranked where you have him. I have him in one league where there's people hoarding quarterbacks, and I can't find somebody that I like that's better. So I'm going to start him again, but it's with no confidence whatsoever.
I start him in a lot of leagues. Aaron Rodgers. He was one of my most rostered quarterbacks, and I've moved away from him this week for Bo Nix in one league. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Heath, as the high guy on Aaron Rodgers, would you start Bo Nix over him?
I think I just said that actually
You did? I'm sorry.
Moments ago. Bo Nix and Russell Wilson both. And that's why I didn't say that Rodgers was the player I love, because there were 2 quarterbacks on the waiver wire that I'm starting over him. Okay. So I would have moved away from him for those guys. But if I couldn't get those guys, I'm starting him. All
right. Atlanta's at Denver. I'm going to let you have a quarterback, running back, wide receiver combo in this game from either team. Which one do you like? Which trio would you take? The Broncos or the Falcons?
Falcons.
Just for Bijan alone.
Yeah, but I looked at your rankings. There's a pretty big difference between Bo Nix and Kirk Cousins. And I was wondering if that was enough to make up the gap.
There's a really big difference between Bijan Robinson and whoever the Broncos running back is.
Okay, then my second question, Cortland Sutton.
Yeah, you're taking Sutton, and like I like Sutton better than the Falcons receivers this week.
That's my question.
So give me Sutton and Bijan. I mean, sorry, that didn't make sense.
You can't have that. Yeah,
no, you can't have that. It is close.
Okay, not a terrible question. Maybe not as close for Heath because he likes Drake London better than Jamey does. But okay. But my follow-up question was, do you like Sutton or London? Jamey said Sutton. How about you, Heath?
I think I have it almost back to back to back. They're all number 2 wide receivers, but London, Mooney, Sutton.
Okay. Kansas City at Buffalo. James Cook or Kareem Hunt? Khalil Shakir or DeAndre Hopkins?
Hunt and Shakir.
So I currently have Cook just ahead of Hunt, I think, but they are, again, very, very close. Shakir is completely dependent on who's playing for the Bills. If both Cooper and Coleman are out, then it's definitely Shakir.
All right, Cincinnati's at the Chargers. Are there any must-start Charger players?
Dobbins.
I'm starting Dobbins.
And I have Herbert ranked as a top 10 quarterback this week, so I would start him.
You like Dobbins better than Kareem Hunt and James Cook?
No.
I think I have it Cook, Dobbins, Hunt, but it might be Cook, Hunt, Dobbins. Cook, Hunt, Dobbins.
I'll put a caveat on it. Gus Edwards missed or was limited in practice with an ankle injury. I hope it's just rest for him, but if he's out, then should be good. This is a good matchup for the receivers, though. It's just you can't say must start for McConkey or Johnston.
I know it's a really interesting game. Find out a lot about the Chargers in this game. But the Chiefs have not allowed more than 13.2 PPR fantasy points to a running back all year. Just going back to James Cook. That includes Bijan, Kamara, Derrick Henry, J.K. Dobbins, Jordan Mason. None of them scored more than 13.2 PPR fantasy points. So James Cook has just a brutal matchup. All right. Minnesota at Tennessee. Good run defenses here. Can you trust the running backs in this game?
Yeah. Well, is Aaron Jones healthy?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to play. It seems like, for the purposes of this argument, he's going to play.
Then love Aaron Jones and Tony Pollard.
I have these guys behind the Cook, Hunt, Dobbins group, but they are number 2 running backs.
Very strange.
They give a lot of touchdowns to Titans.
But how fluky is this? They give up the most receiving touchdowns to running backs. That just seems so strange. I think they've given up 5 receiving touchdowns to running backs, but they give up the 3rd fewest receiving yards and 3.84 yards per carry to running backs. That's awesome. But somehow guys keep catching touchdowns against them. I don't know if that's fluky or scheme or what. All right, Baltimore's at Pittsburgh. Start or sit Mark Andrews?
Start.
He's a start. And yeah, it is really weird because they also give up the 4th fewest running back targets. So that touchdowns thing is very strange.
That's Tennessee. All right, yeah, you guys like Mark Andrews this week because Isaiah Likely did practice.
Yeah.
If Likely is active, then Andrews will probably be around 12 for me.
Okay. But as of now, he's like top 8, I think, for everyone.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I don't know if there were too many tough calls in Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Obviously, we'll talk about Russell Wilson a little bit later. There's no game on this slate that we're doing today that's just one of those throwaway, oh, I know who to start, who to sit. So this is kind of a tougher slate, which is good. I love that. Interesting slate. And finally, Las Vegas at Miami. Who is the best wide receiver in this game?
It's Kirby Myers.
Yeah, of course.
He might be. Yeah, now that Gardner, I haven't adjusted my rankings yet with the quarterback news, but yeah, Myers is probably the safest one.
I definitely think he's the safest, but I have the guts to start him over Tyreek Hill because I do think Hill has more upside. Who do you have ranked higher, Hill or Myers?
Currently Hill, but I think I'm going to adjust that.
Myers.
And where do you have Hill?
20.
He'll be around 15 for me.
All right, now it's time for the Workhorse to Watch segment, brought to you by Microsoft Copilot Plus PCs, powered by Snapdragon, the fastest, most intelligent Windows PCs ever. In this segment, we'll identify a player whose battery just doesn't seem to run out, similar to Copilot Plus PCs. Heath, who is our workhorse running back to highlight this week?
I mean, it's got to be Kareem Hunt. You look at over the last 5 games now, at least 20 touches in every single. He's 21 touches in every single game. He's got a 28 touch game. He's got a 24 touch game. He's got 2 28 touch games. He is the Energizer Bunny. Just keeps going and going and going.
And the Bills allow the second most fantasy points to running backs, 4.66 yards per carry to running backs, the most receiving yards per game to running backs. That hasn't always been a thing for Hunt, but 7 catches last week. And maybe, what do you think? I'll give you over under. His longest run on 125 carries so far this year is 15 yards. Does Kareem Hunt go over or under 15 and a half this week?
Under.
All right, but we still like him because he gets all that work. That was the Workhorse to Watch segment, brought to you by Microsoft Copilot Plus PCs. Whether you're multitasking like never before, working far from power outlets, or sketching your own ideas into existence, you can do it with the new Microsoft Copilot Plus PC, powered by Snapdragon. Battery life varies by device and with usage and settings. Colts and the Jets. Oh, Super Bowl III rematch, guys. I didn't even think about that. Unbelievable. Jets are 4-point favorites. Updated stat of the game. The Colts, they're the new Commanders. They've allowed 78 yards or a touchdown to 15 wide receivers in 10 games. Jamey, you optimistic about Wilson and Adams this week?
I'm starting them. Last week was clearly frustrating and disappointing, especially when you talk about Davante Adams getting 13 targets. But you saw what they were capable of doing 2 games ago. I don't think this is a secondary you fear, and hopefully this is a bounce-back performance for both of them if you're going to buy into Aaron Rodgers. So it could also be a situation where both those guys do well from a catch and yards perspective and don't find the end zone, because you go back to the Houston game for Rodgers, and you got the lucky touchdown, I think. Not lucky, but you got the late touchdown for the Jets for Davante Adams. So I'm starting Wilson as a borderline number 1, number 2 receiver. It's not a great week for wide receivers, and I'm starting Davante Adams as a number 2 receiver.
How many of these guys? How many of these 2 guys, Adams and Wilson, do you have ranked ahead of Drake London?
Both.
Wilson for sure. Adams is right in that wide receiver 2 range with him. I have Adams right behind London.
All right. So look, I'm not going to belabor it too much. These guys are starts. We're hoping for a bounce back here. Personally, if I have Jets, I want DeForest Buckner to miss this game, because even though the Jets didn't give up a lot of pressures last week, it's like every time he is pressured, he gets sacked. He's so slow, cannot get away from anyone. But Rodgers, I get, and you're going to start Breece Hall. I know it's been tough for Breece Hall, and I got to say there's some underlying issues here with Breece Hall. He is not making the explosive plays, not even close to what he was as a rookie. He's got one of the highest rates of carries for 0 or negative yards, and he only has 3 to 4 targets in 3 straight games, and that's directly related to Davante Adams. But he's not like a top 5 guy or anything like that. So, but he's a starter. Rodgers is, I guess, the question mark here, and we've already really talked about him. But Heath, you have him 11th, Jamey 17th, and Dave 23rd. You want to make one final case for Rodgers, Heath?
I don't think the Colts defense is very good. He's been good in 2 of his last 3 games. Rodgers has. They have an implied total of right around 24, and he's been responsible for about 75% of their touchdowns this year.
I like that. And Jamey's a little more cautious. So let's go over to the Colts, where Jonathan Taylor is probably, I'm assuming, the only must start for them.
Yeah, I still think Josh Downs is in the number 2 receiver mix. Let's give him some credit and give Richardson some credit. Last time these guys were together against Houston, it was 4 catches but 109 yards and a touchdown on 9 targets. So the targets were still the same that he's been getting with Joe Flacco. It's just a matter of the quality of targets are certainly not going to be the same, for a guy that's completing 44% of his passes in Richardson. So it's not as slam dunk as it was. It's still, I think, a matchup that can be exploited. The thing for we'll get to Rich in a second, but I think with Pittman coming back, it just completely eliminates any chance you have, whether you trust the quarterback or not, of believing in and trusting Alec Pierce or Adonai Mitchell. So I think all 3 of those guys are basically avoids. Like, I'd be sitting Pittman if I still have him.
Can I ask you guys a question about my job? Does it even make sense to be like, oh, should you start these 2 guys over Breece Hall or Jonathan Taylor, or just since Taylor is going to be started in over 90% of leagues, just kind of skip it? Am I I don't want to waste people's time. What do you think?
I think we should just.
I've only been doing this for 16 years, so I just,
You said there's no games where it's almost all easy starts, and I feel like this, other than Downs, almost profiles as that.
I kind of felt that way as I was doing this. I probably should have made this game last, but so many people are so worried about the Jets that I really thought, let's highlight them. But also this Richardson thing is it stinks for Josh Downs. I mean, he's been really bad with Richardson except for that one game.
Well, to be fair, first 2 games, Downs didn't play. Week 3, Downs first came back with Richardson, and then Richardson was in and out of the lineup.
You're right. It's only 3 games with Richardson, but the first 2 were absolutely horrible. The second one was 22.2 fantasy points at Houston. Someone asked Josh Downs or Devontae Smith?
Downs.
Okay. Josh Downs or Drake London?
London.
All right. And Anthony Richardson, Jamey, for you, Anthony Richardson or Aaron Rodgers?
Rodgers. But this is what I said about Kyler last week.
Mm-hmm.
It was 3 of 4. Now it's 4 or 5, where the Jets have given up a rushing touchdown to a quarterback. And you've seen it in Russell Wilson scoring a rushing touchdown, Josh Allen scoring a rushing touchdown, Kyler scoring 2, and Drake May in that half before he got concussed, 46 yards rushing and a touchdown. In all of those instances, granted, all those quarterbacks playing better than Anthony Richardson right now, all of them scored as a group, because you got to put the Patriots as a group, 19.9 fantasy points or more. Can Richardson do that? Well, there's no semblance of confidence saying he can't, because aside from week 1, he's been 13.5 fantasy points or less in every start. But, you wonder does he have 2 things in his favor? 1, a defense that struggles to stop rushing quarterbacks. And 2, which is, more of a concept and a theory than anything you could prove. Look what happened to Bryce Young when he got sat down, right? He maybe processed things a little bit better, came back and looked like a better quarterback. Does the same thing happen to Anthony Richardson? I don't know. And I would say probably not, because I don't know if there's enough of a sample size to say that he learned anything, because Joe Flacco was terrible. But you're hoping that, the tapping out and the struggles with accuracy, that's not fixable. The tapping out is obviously something he can learn from. But I'm curious to see. I really would like to see. I think Heath said it best on Sports Network yesterday, where this is a guy you want to roster. This is not someone you want to start. He certainly should be picked up, obviously, in any Superflex or 2 QB leagues who's available. But if he does have a good game here, maybe this is the start of something.
Do we have 15 seconds for a terrible Heath take at him?
Oh, yeah, sure.
The tapping out thing is overblown. Wide receivers tap out all the time. Running backs tap out all the time. Quarterbacks have never done it. Quarterbacks have never done what Anthony Richardson had to do on that play, shaking off a 350-pound man and then running and getting tackled again after a 30-yard run. It's understandable he was tired. Everybody else on the field would have been tired too.
I completely agree. Thank you for that. It was a great Heath take. And I'll also say that
I didn't know it was that bad.
No, it was great.
You agreed.
You should have said his ankle hurt or something. That's why he wanted out.
Yes, telling the truth was his problem.
Yeah, right, exactly. One of the reasons he got the job back is that they said he did a better job the last 2 weeks of the in-week before the game preparation, that process, that he really focused on that and made progress there. So that is something that could certainly translate into on-field results. I will read a few questions about this game and then we'll move on. From the chat, Downs or Waddle?
Downs.
Yep.
Richardson or Justin Herbert?
Herbert.
It's Herbert.
Richardson or Caleb Williams?
Richardson.
Yep.
Josh Downs or Cedric Tillman?
Tillman.
We're lockstep.
And that's it for this game. Oh, Jets DST. Heath has them 5th. Dave and Jamey 16th. You going to move them up with the Richardson news?
You haven't refreshed this morning, my friend.
I just refreshed. Didn't I? Yes, I just refreshed. Okay, so where are they?
5th.
They're 5th. Okay. Well, should I refresh again? Let's see. Jets. No, I still have them at oh, wait, there they are. Now they're 6th. I swear to God, I just refreshed before I asked that. All right, they're 6th for you. They're still low for Dave. All right, let's move on to our next game. Atlanta's at Denver. Stat of the game. I think I said this one earlier. The Falcons have allowed 21 or more fantasy points to 4 straight quarterbacks. Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, the combination of Cooper Rush and Dak Prescott and Derek Carr last week was just horrible. So here comes Bo Nix. All right. We already talked about him. Jamey said that's the player that he loves. How high are you on Cortland Sutton this week, guys? Do you have him in your top 15?
He's borderline right there. Top 20 for sure.
Yeah,
he's been awesome for 3 straight games. I mean,
I'm excited for him. So 15.3 or more fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games, and tough matchup last week, and he came through. What about Audric Estime? 68% roster. Does anybody want to start Audric Estime?
I would prefer to just roster him at this point and see what happens.
Yeah, I just talked about how much I don't want to start Najee, and I would still start Najee over Audric Estime.
Audric Estime or Raheem Mostert from the chat?
Estime.
I have Mostert 1 spot higher right now. I don't want to make too much of that one game. It sounds like they're still going to use him, but I don't really have a strong feel.
Jason asks to pick 2 of these 3: Cortland Sutton, Nick Chubb, and Tony Pollard in half PPR.
Sutton and Pollard.
Sutton and Pollard. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Nick Chubb and Sutton.
Okay. Let's get your Bo Nix questions, people. Bo Nix, I'm looking for some Bo Nix. Oh, here we go. Nix or Jaden Daniels?
Daniels.
I will ask Nix or Jared Goff against Jags.
Nix.
I've got Goff.
All right. He's top 12, though, Bo Nix, so you can start him. All right. So that's the Broncos. Now let's focus on the Falcons. Sit Kirk Cousins. Easy sit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And start Bijan Robinson.
He's had 4 good games this season. 2 have been against Tampa Bay.
I know. And not just that. I mean, he's had I have it here somewhere. How many games where he has single-digit fantasy points? It's a lot, or 10.2 or fewer. 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5. He's got such a low floor. Okay, so sit Cousins, start Bijan. Okay, now we talk about the receivers. I saw Drake London or Jawan Jennings. Who do you guys have there?
I have Jennings.
London for me.
Drake London, 9 end zone targets, ranking 5th in the NFL. But I'm nervous. I'm very nervous. I do think he's going to get shadowed by Surtain. I think Surtain's going to win this matchup. I think it could be a 50-yard game, no touchdowns. Just to go through it.
It could be a 50-yard game, no touchdowns, and it's still 12 or 13 fantasy points.
I could be generous there because just DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Mike Evans, Garrett Wilson, DeAndre Hopkins, 41 or fewer yards, 0 touchdowns, single-digit PPR fantasy points against the Broncos. Only Zay Flowers has had more than 80 yards against the Broncos. So it's brutal. It's a brutal, and it's not just Surtain, by the way. It's not like he's the only good player that they have. Like, they just have a good defense. Yeah. All right. That's it. Fire away with your Drake London questions, but you guys pretty much value. There's one: London or Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek.
I've got London.
You pretty much value Mooney and London similarly, right?
Yes. Back to back.
And Jamey, how do you rank them?
Mooney slightly ahead of London.
All right. How about like Drake London or J.K. Dobbins?
Dobbins for me.
London. I think it's funny on that Tyreek question. The Raiders and Broncos have given up almost exactly the same number of fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers.
That's what I said at the top of the show. Is actually a bad matchup for Tyreek Hill. Here's a question. Sit one of these guys in PPR: Drake London, Tyreek Hill, Cedric Tillman, or Calvin Ridley.
Sitting London.
Oh,
I'm sitting Ridley.
You have Tillman over London, huh, Jamey?
I do.
Okay. Cousins or Geno?
Whose last 3 games have been better?
I think
Sure,
London left one of them after with
that's true.
The snaps. Cousins or Geno?
Geno.
London or Dell or Downs?
London.
London or Kraft?
London.
Mooney or Sutton?
Sutton.
Mooney.
And then Heath just answered this one, but Jamey, London or Ridley? You both can answer. London or Ridley?
I did answer it when you gave a list of Ridley and London in the same question, and I said I would start Ridley over London.
Oh, you said
I would start London over Ridley.
You said you'd sit London in that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think that's pretty much it. Oh, Kyle Pitts. Forgot about Kyle Pitts. How we feel about Kyle Pitts this week?
Don't love him, but low-end starter. I would start him over Engram, for example.
Yeah, I'd start him over Goddard tonight.
I like Goddard better, but I can see that.
Would you start Tucker Kraft or Kyle Pitts?
Kraft.
Heath, what'd you say?
Pitts.
Would you start Jonnu Smith or Kyle Pitts?
Pitts. Only way I would start Jonnu over Pitts is if Tyreek's ruled out.
By the way, Kyle Pitts, I looked at 33 tight ends with 25 or more targets, 5th in yards per target, 2nd in yards per catch. Just doesn't get a lot of targets. That's the issue here. It's target share. He's had a target share higher than 18.5% in only one game this season. Denver is 20th against tight ends. And just trying to, I don't know. I was trying to see if maybe they get a lot of tight end targets because they're good against receivers, but I don't know that they do. Kelsey had 12, but he's Kelsey. All right, that's it for that game. Unless Denver DST, they're top 7. You can start them. We're going to take a break. We've got Chiefs and Bills. I'm a little worried about this game. I feel like the Chiefs are going to kick their butt, but we'll see. All right, we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
Saturdays at 3:30. It's big time. Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
What do you think, Heath? Chiefs gonna go in there and kick their butt?
No, it's not January yet.
The Bills are 2-point favorites in this game. Look, I think I don't know how you feel, but like no Cooper and no Coleman last week, and Allen was bad against the Colts. So
he's 3-1 against the Chiefs in the regular season. He has multiple touchdowns in every one of those games. My expectation, because I think there's been pretty much all of their games are like this. Probably whoever gets the ball last is going to win. It's going to be a 1-score game. And Josh Allen's probably going to score 25 fantasy points.
I don't know why I went out and said why I said that. Because that's just leaving me open to so much criticism.
Yeah.
They don't really I feel like they don't kick a lot of people's butts. I feel like they win a lot of close games. But yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm just gonna stick with my original prediction. Tyler Bass misses a 35-yard field goal at the buzzer.
I would say one thing you could probably bet on is the Chiefs are going to be down by a touchdown at some point in the game. Because they pretty much are every week.
I forgot to mention this. If you haven't signed up yet for BetMGM, get on that. Use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up on BetMGM, and you can get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up. All right, now to the stats, to the starts and the sits. Patrick Mahomes is a sit. Patrick Mahomes or Kirk Cousins?
Mahomes.
Are you guys? I mean, I was a little surprised at the ranking. He's no higher than 17th for anybody, unless I just haven't hit refresh. But I feel like he's playing better lately. Do you guys feel that way?
Mahomes?
Yeah.
He's definitely playing better lately. I mean, first off, he had 2 great matchups against the Raiders and the Bucks.
Yeah.
And then he comes back last week against a team that he's typically struggled against, and he played fine. He just didn't have a big statistical day, which is kind of what the case is with him a lot of the times. Is he's not playing poorly. He's just not producing for fantasy. Like, there's a big difference. There's a reason why they're undefeated. He said they're down 7. Okay, Patrick, go lead us on a drive. Okay. It's like, yes, sir. Just go and do it.
Yeah.
He can do that almost anytime he wants to. It's just when they get inside the red zone, they're running, and they're relying on their defense. I'm sure if he had to go throw it 50 times, he'd have 302.
But what is this Bills defense good at? What is this Bills defense bad at?
Well, they're always good at taking away, both teams here. They take away big plays,
right,
in the passing game.
And you can run on the Bills.
And you can definitely run on the Bills. You can't run on the Chiefs. All right, so we like so we don't love Mahomes this week. And we do like Kareem Hunt. And
this will be interesting though if Juju plays. Because has he had now, not that these guys are great, they're not in their prime, they're not superstar receivers, but has he had a situation where he's had 3 healthy pass catchers that have some significance to their game?
No, but I don't know if he has that. I mean, Xavier Worthy's doing nothing.
What I'm not sure about is, like, what is Juju going to do? Because I don't think they're going to move Hopkins to like a downfield role. I'm not sure Juju plays that much.
Speaking of Hopkins, start or sit?
Number 3.
Start in 3 receiver leagues, sit in 2 receiver. I mean, he's got 3 games with the Chiefs. You want to throw out the first one because he didn't have, enough knowledge of the playbook and play enough. Fine, throw it out. Monster game against Tampa Bay. 2 words, Tampa Bay. Comes back next week against Denver.
2 words. You know the words.
Patrick Stan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Buffalo's pass defense, you said it's been good. They haven't given up a lot of big production to number 1 receivers either. So I don't know if you're saying, okay, it's just he's escaping Patrick Surtain, he's going to be fine. I don't think so.
I'm not saying that.
Buffalo is much, much closer to Patrick Surtain than they are to Tampa Bay.
Yeah. Travis Kelce is the easiest start in this game. Josh Allen, you guys have in the top 5. 4 straight games with 23.8 to 28.4 fantasy points before a terrible game last week, 18.2 fantasy points. That's terrible for him at the Colts.
Can we play the game? Where does Josh Allen rank at quarterback in fantasy points per game?
I'm going to say 4th.
I'll say 3.
5.
Oh, okay. And that's where Heath has him this week. All right. And okay, so James Cook, who are some guys you might start over James Cook? Again, I mentioned it. The Chiefs haven't allowed more than 13.2 PPR fantasy points to a running back all season. So give me some guys you'd start over James Cook.
Chase Brown. I think it's easy.
Brees Hall.
Kareem Hunt. I'm
moving Cook behind Dobbins.
I would as well, and I'll give you one more. Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I hope that Jamey's optimism about Nick Chubb is right. I want to see Nick Chubb be Nick Chubb again. I'm gonna have to see it before I go quite that high.
The Chiefs' run defense being this great, it started, and I'm not going to say there was some adjustment or anything, or I have no idea, but it started last postseason against the Bills. That was the beginning of this stretch where they have been dominant against running backs. And James Cook started that stretch with 18 carries for 61 yards, 4 catches for 21 yards. He scored 12.2 PPR fantasy points. All right. Bills, Heath, break down the Bills wide receivers. Khalil Shakir seems pretty safe for about 11 PPR fantasy points. We're hoping Cooper can play. Keon Coleman's not going to play. There's Mac Hollins, who's had 2 good games in a row with the injuries. Break down the Bills receivers against the Chiefs, who are 10th best against receivers.
Khalil Shakir is the only Bills wide receiver that I really want to start, no matter who plays. But if Cooper and Coleman are both out, then Khalil Shakir is a number 2 wide receiver that I really want to start. If those guys are if one of those guys is playing, I'm viewing Shakir as a high-end number 3. Both Coleman and Cooper, if they're able to play, are probably like flex start throws.
I'm sorry. I thought that Keon Coleman had been ruled out, but I think I'm wrong. So
Keon Coleman is not expected to play. I don't know if he's officially been ruled out. I believe Sean McDermott said at the beginning of the week that they're not expecting.
Okay. And he did not practice yesterday.
Remember, they have their bye next week, so they're going to be cautious with. That's why I think it's also going to be cautious with Kincaid.
If sorry for asking this again because I asked it earlier in the show, but if Cooper plays, would you go? If Cooper plays, who's the highest ranked receiver in this game?
Shakir.
It's probably Hopkins for me, but he and Shakir would be very, very close.
All right, so you guys are not going to want to start Amari Cooper if he plays. And then Dawson Knox. This is one of the biggest rankings disputes. Let me just go to the rankings. And
I need to adjust my Dawson Knox. I wanted to see like who's practicing for the Bills before I put Dawson Knox too high.
Okay.
I think I've got him 24th right now. He's probably going to be somewhere between 13 and 17.
Okay, and that's still going to be lower than Jamey, who has him.
I'm going to drop him a few spots. I was a little too aggressive with my Dawson Knox ranking.
So he'll settle in around.
He's going to be in the top 12.
Okay. So you didn't like Evan Ingram. You said you don't like Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram or Dawson Knox?
Dawson Knox. Assuming Kincaid is out.
Of course.
I think like part of it for me is on a per game basis this year, Dalton Kincaid is tight end 15 or something. Maybe he's higher than that now. 19, tight end 19. Like, I'm not sure. Like, hopefully Dawson Knox scores a touchdown, but Dalton Kincaid hasn't been any good.
Kincaid has not been any good. But if Kincaid was playing this week against this defense, I would like Kincaid a lot, especially if Amari Cooper joins Keon Coleman sitting. There's a lot of factors here at play. If Cooper plays, then Knox goes from 12 to probably 15, and I would start Engram over him. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things we have to keep an eye on here. But the thing that I like about Dawson Knox is he's got such an opportunity here. And it's, and this is, I think, where Heath and I differ in our process. Like I buy into the hope more so than Heath does typically when we have these conversations. So with what he's got in front of him, if there is no Kincaid, if there is no Amari Cooper, playing against this defense, which has given up a lot of production to tight ends, like we can't sit here and say we like Josh Allen without saying we're going to like somebody helping him. Now, it could be Mac Hollins, it could be Shakir, it could be Ty Johnson for all we know. I mean, Ray Davis scored a 63-yard touchdown, 2 games ago to help him and his production, and his legs will be there for him also. But somebody's going to have to catch some passes here. And so I think when you just look at Knox's scenario, everybody is gone. So it's 6 of the last 7 games. Kincaid has had 6+ targets. The one game where he didn't was last week when he left. He had 5. So you're looking at 6 to 7 targets against this Chief defense. I probably go back and look at it and say how many guys have had 6+ targets and what have they done. It's probably pretty good. So if Knox gets those chances, if he should have the chance for a good game. You got to buy into the if.
I think like the real thing that we have to decide today is Amari Cooper's a partial participant at practice again today. And you have to make a decision. You're starting Dawson Knox or Dallas Goedert. You're starting Dawson Knox or Zach Ertz.
So I think in the case of Ertz, for me at least, if those are my choices, like if I've been starting Ertz all season, I'm going to stick with Ertz. But if those are my choices, like as a pivot play, I probably, and Kincaid misses and Cooper's limited again, I may just wait it out and go get Will Dissly, who's gotten, 9+ points in 3 of his last 4 and has a great matchup also, so like that would be the move I think I would do.
And I want to bring this up because last week I gave a stat last Thursday or Friday about Dalton Kincaid getting 5 to 7 targets most weeks. And there had been a few tight ends that had 5 to 7 targets against the Colts. And I think 4 out of 5 of them had big games. And Dalton Kincaid didn't. He had 2 catches for 24 yards on 5 targets, but he was wide open for a touchdown. and Josh Allen missed him. And if he had caught that pass, I would have said, look, even with 5 targets against a great matchup like the Colts were, he could have been really good. And by the way, he had a 50% target per route run rate last week, Dalton Kincaid, with Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman out. So if Kincaid might play this week, but I think if Cooper does not play, then you could see him throwing to the tight ends a lot. And you would have, if Allen didn't miss him on a wide open ball, you would have seen a good game from a tight end in a great matchup. And they have a great matchup against the Chiefs, obviously. It's maybe a little bit of a stretch, but this is the type of thing that wins you your week or loses you your week in some cases because of how you buy into these guys and what their expectations are or their failures have been. So if Knox catches look, he could have 2 catches for 10 yards and a touchdown. Yeah.
And then we're straddling the fence here on did he have a good game or not? Because he's a tight end. So it's just a matter of who you're comparing him to. So I'm more aggressive with it because of I don't like Engram's situation. I'm tired of the Pitts frustration. I'm tired of whatever other tight end you want to throw into the conversation here who hasn't been.
Somebody brought up Jake Ferguson. Would you start him?
Yeah, Ferguson, not somebody I want to trust right now in that matchup against Houston. Statistically, number 1 against opposing tight ends, and he didn't have a great game with Cooper Rush. But again, he's going to get probably more chances if Josh Allen does not lean on his backup tight end. All
right. Let's move on to our next game. And the DSTs are in play here. You can check the rankings, but this game, that was a long time. All right. So let's go to Cincinnati and the Chargers here. The Chargers against good offenses so far this year. The Chiefs and the Cardinals scored 17 points, but this is going to be the toughest test so far. The Bengals against good defenses. They scored 25 points at the Chiefs. They scored 14 offensive points at Cleveland. If they were a good defense, they scored 17 points against Philadelphia. So this is a much different challenge than Baltimore. And I don't know how this game's going to play out. And this is such an interesting game here.
I think I heard that this is the first game this season the Chargers have played against a top 10 offense.
Yeah, they've had such a cake schedule, but they've been fantastic defensively. So you guys have no hesitation on Joe Burrow. He's top 4. Doesn't seem to be a lot of hesitation on Chase Brown. He's top 12 in PPR. He's like top 16. Dave's a little bit lower on him, but you guys are very high on Chase Brown. Jamar Chase, you're going to start. Just want to give you this stat here just for fun. Jamar Chase has averaged 48.4 points per game against the Ravens in 2 games and 16.1 points per game in his other 8 games. So that was interesting. Start or sit T. Higgins if he plays, Heath.
Man, you hate Jamar Chase.
I know.
Yesterday you wanted to sit him in the fantasy championship because of a bad matchup, and now he's terrible against everyone but the Ravens.
He's going to get L'Jarius Sneed. Sit him everywhere.
I know. I'm telling you, man. But T. Higgins, if he plays, start or sit?
Must start receiver.
Yeah, I think you'd have to start him. It doesn't seem like he's playing at 50 if he's not fully healthy. So I'm going to assume if he's playing, he's fully healthy.
Here's one of my stats of the game. T. Higgins has 7 or more targets in 4 of 5 games. There have only been 5 wide receivers who have had more than 7 targets against the Chargers, but 4 of them scored 14.3 or more PPR fantasy points. So that's one of the reasons why the Chargers have been so good against receivers. They just don't get thrown on. But we've seen in kind of recent weeks, they have been thrown on a little bit more, and there's been some success there. And T. Higgins, again, 7 or more targets in 4 or 5 games. If we like Higgins, what does it mean for Gesicki, Jamey?
If Higgins plays, you can't trust Gesicki. If Higgins is out, then Gesicki's going to be in a lot of my lineups. And, I went through waivers the last 2 days of Tuesday and Wednesday, and all 30 of my leagues, and where I have Gesicki, I'm just holding him, and trying to find other options just in case. So Dawson Knox, Will Dissly will be pivot plays for me if Higgins is in, and I don't have another tight end that I like. But I think you just look at it. 9 targets last week. He just didn't have a big game. He was still heavily involved. Should continue to be heavily involved. I can't imagine that just because of I'm blanking on the time. Tanner Hudson. Just because the game that he had, it's going to be bad for Gesicki. So yeah, it's Higgins in, Gesicki out, Higgins out, Gesicki in.
And someone's asking Gesicki or Will Dissly if Higgins plays.
Dissly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Justin Herbert, getting a lot of Justin Herbert questions, and I love it. Right. So he's playing pretty well. He's got. He had 279 or more yards in 3 straight games before only throwing 18 passes last week against the Titans. Herbert or Love in a 4-point per passing touchdown league? Question from Dan.
I would go Herbert. Herbert ran for 32 yards last week.
I've got love. My biggest problem with Herbert is like I can't find anything in his game log that suggests any sort of trend at all. Jamey's right. He ran for 32 yards last week. He ran for 2 yards the week before that. We had this 2 or 3 weeks. We had a 3-week stretch where he threw at least 32 passes in 3 straight games. And then he's thrown 45 passes in his last 2 games combined. He has 3 games all year with 2 passing touchdowns. I think he's very good. I just don't. Like, I've got him as a high-end QB2, and I don't have any confidence in ranking him higher or lower.
And I think that's the people who are concerned about Herbert, how they'll approach it. And I started the week that way also. But it's, looking at Cincinnati's defense, the hope, again, there's that word that I know you don't like and I'll buy into, is that this is a shootout, because the Chargers defense doesn't necessarily play like it's been performing statistically. And it's Joe Burrow on the other side and Jamar Chase and hopefully T. Higgins and Chase Brown. And that offense just comes into town and puts up points. And then Herbert has to throw. So I'm hopeful that's the case. And in the case of Jordan Love, I mean, look, if you want to roster a quarterback and only go with one of these guys, you're going to want to go with Love over Herbert because it feels like the ceiling's higher for him. But you got to give the Bears some credit. They haven't given up big games to quarterbacks many times this season. And so I think they'll frustrate Love a little bit. So I look at Herbert having slightly higher ceiling. They're a few spots apart. Both are number 1 quarterbacks for me. So if you want to go with Love over Herbert, I'm not going to fight anybody on that.
Yeah, I think I'm lower on both those guys. I would start Bo Nix and Russell Wilson over both of them.
I would start Nix over both. I have Herbert ahead of Wilson.
The way I feel about Herbert, I have a feeling you'll agree, is if he can throw 30 or more passes, he's probably going to have a good game. And I'm just hoping that the Bengals put enough pressure on. And not only that, the Bengals have a good run defense. They started out with a terrible run defense, but they were very injured early in the year. Now their run defense has really come around. And, just double check. Like last week, Derrick Henry, 16 carries, 68 yards, and a touchdown. The week before that, the Raiders running backs were terrible. The week before that, Barkley was good. The week before that, Nick Chubb averaged 2 yards per carry. Tyrone Tracy averaged like 3 yards per carry. So they've come around. Their run defense is good. So I'm just hoping for a lot of points because the Bengals give up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. That's really been 4 games where they've been crushed by Lamar Jackson twice, Jaden Daniels, and Jalen Hurts. They haven't been bad against kind of fringy quarterbacks. But that's my hope for Herbert is that he has to throw more in this game because this will be the first time they give up more than – I don't think they've given up more than 20 points all year.
I do think I think your theory is exactly right, and I quickly agreed that if he throws 30 passes, he's going to be good. And then I looked, and he's thrown 30 passes in 3 games, and he was good in one of them.
So have great receivers. I mean, it's true. Like these guys are good; they're not great, but you're right. It's nothing set in stone. So, Jamey, do you also have Bo Nix ahead of Herbert?
I do. I think looking at the floor probably is a little bit safer for Nix just based on what we've seen over the last 6 weeks by comparison to the last, 3 of the last 4 or 3 in a row for Herbert. But I agree with you. There is the chance for a higher ceiling for Herbert here because of what he could be in this game. It's just a matter of, will he get to that point? And so I like Nix slightly better, but both are top 8 quarterbacks. I think I have it. Goff is somewhere in the mix also, but Nix is 7. I think Goff might be 8 and Herbert 9, or Herbert's 8 and Goff is 9.
All right, Herbert or Tua?
Herbert.
Herbert for sure.
Okay, Chargers running backs. We're not going to start Gus Edwards, but he's 39% rostered. You can still pick him up. I'm going to double check on that. I think that was as of yesterday. I'm going to double check on that roster percentage for Gus Edwards. Dobbins is a low-end starter. He's around 20th in the rankings. This is a good defense. He doesn't do well against good run defenses. A little nervous here. You guys nervous about Dobbins?
A little bit. I think Dobbins, Cook, James Cook, Tony Pollard, they all make me nervous as, low-end number 2 running backs. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Chubb is better than all of them.
All right, Gus Edwards is now rostered in 47% of leagues. How do you feel about the Chargers wide receivers?
Both
number 3s.
Both good number 3 receivers. I wish there was something to say, this is why you should start them with confidence.
Right.
But there's, you're not going to chase the touchdowns for Johnston the last 2 weeks. You've said this a number of times. If Denzel Ward doesn't fall down, does he have the big game against the Browns? Or forget about him, whatever it was.
Yeah, it's busted coverage.
Yeah, busted coverage. But look, he's played 8 games and he scored in 4 of them.
He gets a touchdown every 7 targets, Quentin Johnson.
Right. So
that's the real stat.
Right. That's something to hang your hat on there. So I think number 3 receiver, and McConkey was, 11.1 PPR points or more in 2 of his last 3. The one he didn't was where Herbert threw 18 times. So I'd like to. I would not be afraid to start them in 3 receiver leagues without question.
All right, we got some questions in the chat. Quentin Johnston or Cedric Tillman?
Tillman.
Quentin Johnston or Romeo Dobbs?
I'll go Quentin.
I have Dobbs.
Would you start the Chargers guys over the Bills guys or Hopkins?
Shakir, if Cooper is out, then the Chargers guys. Chargers guys over the Bills guys if Coleman did.
I've got Hopkins over the Chargers.
Okay, and then Will Dissly is someone that you could pivot to. The Bengals allow the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends, 42 yards or a touchdown to 8 tight ends in their last 6 games. That includes guys like Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler, Jordan Akins, and Grant Calcaterra. So Dissly's an okay option. Chargers DST is borderline 12th for Jamey, 10th for Dave, 17th for Heath. These could be outdated. Sorry, but let's just call we'll get to the updated rankings on the Chargers DST, but let's just call them a borderline start. They are 12th, 13th, and 17th. Okay, for Jamey, Dave, Heath. Our next game is Minnesota, Tennessee. We're going to go a little bit faster here. Starters hit Sam Darnold.
Low end starter behind Herbert, behind Nix, behind Wilson.
Yes. I think I have him 1 spot ahead of Herbert, but agree on the other 2.
Okay. And Jamey, talk about the running backs. You said you're nervous about them. I don't know if you said you were nervous about Aaron Jones, but definitely
not nervous about Aaron Jones. I am nervous about Tony Pollard. This Minnesota run defense has been good. We saw Tyjae Spears come back last week. Tony Pollard's numbers took a little bit of a hit, obviously playing a tough defense as well. I think you just look at Jones. He's been a little touchdown unlucky, and now he's facing a team that's just giving up touchdowns. You mentioned it's a lot of passing touchdowns. It's also a lot of rushing touchdowns lately. So since week 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rushing touchdowns to running backs. With the amount of work that Aaron Jones typically gets, if he typically gets that, we're talking about 20 total touches here. I like that against this defense. And
he also has had some tough matchups, and he had 19 for 102 yards against Houston. He had 14 for 93 and a touchdown against Detroit, 17 carries for 88 yards last week at Jacksonville. It does have a good run defense. So Jones has been a guy, unlike Dobbins, that's been efficient even with tough matchups. Okay, but Pollard, and here's how it worked with Pollard, because Dave mentioned this on Sunday. I'll just reiterate it. He was actually really not dominating, but clearly ahead of Spears in touches for the first 3 quarters. But they got behind big, playing catch up, and Tyjae Spears played, I don't know if he played every snap or most snaps in the 4th quarter, but when they were playing from behind, it was all Tyjae Spears. So they're in a competitive game. Last week, it was Pollard had a significant edge just in terms of touches and snaps and all that. Certainly snaps. So I just want to bring that up. Heath, you have anything to add about the running backs in this game?
No, they're both number 2s for me. I do have Jones higher, but Pollard's kind of ahead of me for me that group of guys that I don't want to start. I do feel a little bit nervous about him, but I'm probably just starting him.
Justin Jefferson start. Jordan Addison start or sit?
Sit.
Yeah, I'd like to sit him.
TJ Hawkinson, is he a layup this week?
He's a top 10 tight end. I'd start him over Engram. I start him over Ferguson. I start him over Pitts. I would start him over Dawson Knox. But I like the setup for him. Look, you gotta expect a lot of targets based on what we saw last week. First game back, shake off the rust. Second game back, dominant, looking like TJ Hawkinson again. So this Titans defense has not been great against tight ends lately, and hopefully Hawkinson can continue to build off what he did last week.
Minnesota's time of possession the last 2 weeks, 36 minutes and 54 seconds, 42 minutes and 19 seconds. They have run 71 and 82 plays, and it has finally led to some pass attempts from Sam Darnold, 34 and 38. but they're still kind of a run heavy team. Hawkinson has not played 50% of the snaps yet. That we would like to see that get up, but 9 targets last week on like 48% of the snaps or something. That's pretty awesome. Sit Will Levis. We talked about Pollard. Spears, is a flex. Calvin Ridley coming off a big game. Start or sit Calvin Ridley against Minnesota, who gives up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers.
I'm starting him. I mean, I haven't said that very much this season, but you got the performance you needed to see. Touchdown on the first drive, touchdown in garbage time. You could see something similar happening. Not counting on that, but you could see him being involved early, and maybe Minnesota adjusts, and then they're chasing points, and he's still going to get his chances. The numbers bear it out that they're giving up a lot of production to opposing wide receivers, and the targets have remained constant for him since DeAndre Hopkins has been gone. It's 8+ targets in every game. Like, that's hard to overlook.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those things like Dave was talking about on yesterday's show, where like they have given up a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers. Do we think they're a bad pass defense? Not at all.
No.
So I think Ridley's a must start in the 3 wide receiver league. He's an okay start in a 2 wide receiver league. I think there's a correlation probably. The last 2 weeks that we've seen the Vikings finally run a bunch of plays, we've seen wide receiver production against them fall off a cliff because teams aren't throwing the ball 40 times against them because the Vikings have the ball. So I have a hard time believing that Will Levis is going to be throwing 35 to 40 pass attempts. He's going to need one big play, but he makes a lot of big plays.
Start Ridley or Lamb? Question from Lance here.
Oh, Lamb, for sure.
And question from me, start Ridley or London?
I would actually start Ridley over Lamb.
Okay, Ridley or London?
Ridley.
Man, this is, I think, the 4th time that we've answered this question.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Ridley
or Najee Harris?
Ridley.
Ridley.
Okay. Looking for some more questions here in the chat. And don't see any for this game. Sit Chigo Okonkwo and sit Nick Westbrook-Akine. And start the Vikings DST, their top 2. Baltimore's at Pittsburgh in the last 10 meetings. All right, going back, I looked at the last 10 meetings. There were some high-scoring games, but in 7 straight games between Baltimore and Pittsburgh, no team has scored more than 20 points. And no team has scored more than 17 in 5 straight games. Does this game get a little loose? The over-under is 48. So do we think that we get some points in this game, or is this going to be a Baltimore-Pittsburgh struggle-rama?
I think we'll get some points. I like that Dave is banking on the theory of, these 2 teams just go back to what has typically been the rivalry here. And, you can argue it's the best rivalry in football since Mike Tomlin and Harbaugh have been there. But it's hard to expect that with what Lamar Jackson is doing and how that Steelers defense may or may not perform. It's hard to expect the Ravens defense to hold up from a pass defense perspective, given how poorly they've looked all season, and especially if Kyle Hamilton doesn't play. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to trust Russell Wilson based on the small sample size as a low-end starter. I don't want to buy into him fully, so I'm not going to get crazy with who I'm starting him over. But, 24+ points in 2 of 3 games, and against this defense, why not? George Pickens is a must-start receiver. I think Heath said it best. You want to avoid Najee Harris if you can. And Jaylen Warren, it's funny. Like, I don't think anybody's going to rank Jaylen Warren ahead of Najee Harris because we haven't seen like a big spike in the passing game. But This feels like a game where he's going to have a better opportunity to have success than Najee does. So, I mean, yeah, I would rather look at what's happening this season as opposed to historically.
I hate to step on your toes, Adam, but you messed up the stat of the game.
Oh, what is it? I didn't even give the stat of the game yet.
Stat of the game, Russell Wilson has played 3 games for the Steelers this year and thrown 6 touchdown passes.
Oh.
Kenny Pickett led the Steelers last year with 6 touchdown passes.
Yeah, I did read that in your
Like the last 7 games between these 2 teams, who's been playing quarterback for the Steelers? It's been an awful quarterback or the ghost of Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, and 4 of the last 6 quarterbacks that face the Ravens have thrown for 334 or more yards. That's insane. The Ravens give up the most big plays. Russell Wilson has the highest ADOT since becoming the starter. I think only Anthony Rich. I don't know, maybe there's one guy, but he basically he throws the ball downfield a ton. He's making big plays. It's a good matchup for him. And you said, Dave brought up the possibility that this is a low-scoring game.
Yeah. I mean, he's not
Russell Wilson 11th. You guys have Russell Wilson 11th, 10th. He has George Pickens top 5. So Wilson, If any Wilson questions, Wilson or Daniels, we're going Jaden Daniels there. Wilson or Darnold?
Russ.
Wilson.
Flowers or Ridley?
Ridley.
Flowers.
Yeah, any hesitation?
Oh, I'm sorry. Flowers. Excuse me.
Lamar Jackson,
For some reason, I was thinking Pickens when you said Ridley.
Okay. Lamar Jackson, George Pickens, Derrick Henry, piece of cake starts.
Zay Flowers, piece of cake.
That was my follow. Go right back to him?
Yes.
Okay. Mark Andrews?
He's a must-start guy for me. If Likely's out, he's still a start for me if Likely's in.
Yep.
I mean, you can't ignore the production he's had for like the last 5 games. 4 of the last 5 have been really good.
He only needs 5 targets. He's good. And then any interest in like Deontay Johnson, Rashad Bateman, Mike Williams, any secondary receivers?
I mean, if you're desperate, I would lean toward Bateman, just based on his body of work. But, 3 games now with 2 games now with Deontay Johnson on the field, 1 good, 1 bad for Bateman. The game before that was the Sun game in Cleveland where he had the drop. The tough call, I think, for me is Freiermuth. Just because of how bad this secondary is, he just hasn't been getting targets. With Russ, and so you don't want to chase the touchdown. But I think if you're gonna, hype up Dawson Knox, you got to, put Pat Freiermuth somewhat similar because they probably both need touchdowns to be successful.
We joked about it with Arthur Smith at the beginning of the year, and he's kind of done it. Like Darnell Washington got in Pat Freiermuth's way. And I really hate it, but let me pull it up here. I think over the last month, they both have a 10% target share.
And here's one other factor, though, that's a positive for all these guys, for Pickens, not that you need it. Russell Wilson has thrown 28, 29 pass attempts in all 3 games. This is just like the Justin Herbert thing, right? But you got a game where they may not be able to run the ball at all efficiently against the Ravens. So can we get 35 pass attempts from Russell Wilson? That would help.
What's 10% of 35?
Yeah, I know, but I'll take 3.5 targets.
No, you won't.
No, I won't. But just there's opportunity, I think, for more pass attempts for Russell Wilson. Steelers DST is a sit this week. Yeah, self-explanatory. All right, should we save the Dolphins Raiders for tomorrow, or you want to just knock it out here?
Knock it out.
All right, who do you trust on the Dolphins?
It's almost tomorrow anyway, so let's just keep going.
Yeah, who do you trust on the Dolphins?
HN.
I'm still starting Tyreek Hill, but trust is a tough word right now.
Tyreek Hill or Zay Flowers?
Flowers.
Well, what do you not like about Tua? Is he in top 12 for you?
No.
Just outside. Good matchup against the Raiders, but it's not like they're giving up 25 plus points per game. It's more like 22, 21 to 3 of the last 4 quarterbacks. So low end starter.
What I don't like about Tua is his intended air yards per pass attempt, 5.8 yards, the lowest of his career.
It's pathetic.
The one thing though, just to go back to this, and it's the hard argument because of the Rams game. Arizona's defense is good. That was his first game. Mm-hmm. Buffalo's defense is good. Yep. That was his second game. Back-to-back road games. They're terrible in primetime. To me, this is the game that I'm looking at. If they do not play better offensively, it's a nightmare moving forward. If they come out and play well this game, then it's like, okay, I'll buy back in.
Did the league figure Mike McDaniel out?
So right before we did the show, I do a podcast for Jonathan Zaslow, who's a local guy in South Florida. And we talk a lot of Dolphins, understandably so. That's exactly what it feels like. It feels as if they've taken away everything down the field. And why are there not 4 or 5 targets just specifically to each wide receiver behind the line of scrimmage, near the line of scrimmage? It felt like that was the case in the start of the game with Jalen Waddle last week, and then completely went out. 54 yards receiving to open the game, 55 receiving yards is what he finished with. Like, why are you not giving these guys consistently 10 plus targets?
I have a take. I went back and watched, and Tua is getting the ball out of his hand very quickly. One of the quickest in football, which isn't a huge surprise. But I think their offensive line stinks. And I think that like last week, every time there was pressure, pretty much he went down. It's kind of like what I said about Aaron Rodgers. I think he just doesn't have time to let these plays develop, and he's relying so much on Devon Achane. Heath, you mentioned 5.8 intended air yards per pass attempt. It's 5.1 since he's come back from the injury. That's unbelievable. It's pathetic. It's ridiculous. So I think like it's just one man's opinion, but based on what I saw in the Rams game, the Rams they get after you. They have a really good defensive line. But like this guy, he doesn't have time to let plays develop. When he tried, he kept getting sacked. So he just gets rid of the ball really quickly. And I have gone from this being one of my favorite offenses to watch to this being one of my least favorite offenses to watch. It drives me crazy to see this team with all this talent just throw. Like I love Achane, but he shouldn't be getting the ball he shouldn't be catching 8 passes a game. It's ridiculous.
So to that point, he is tied for the lowest amount of time in the pocket with last year. He has his lowest career pressure rate, but his second highest career sack rate.
Oh, that's interesting. Right. And the pressure rate's low because he's getting rid of the ball so quickly. The problem with my theory is what you said. He also got rid of the ball so quickly last year, and Tyreek Hill was incredible. Why isn't it happening this year? I don't know. Anyway, to the Raiders here. Start Bowers. We like Jacoby Myers quite a bit. He's our favorite receiver in this game, right? Yeah, we established that.
Yep.
Would you start a running back? Madison or Zamir White?
I'm curious to see what's going to happen because, you go into a bye week with a coordinator change, and it's not like Madison has been dominant. He's had a couple of good games, but you wonder if they go back to Zamir White, who had the groin injury and missed time, and is he going to be the workhorse that we thought going into the season, at least in this matchup? So I want to roster Zamir White if I have an ability to stash somebody on my team because he's available in well over 50% of leagues. But I'm not starting anybody here. I mean, Madison would be the closest if you're going to start somebody as a flex, just because work in the passing game should be there for him and the ability to still get some either goal line chances or fourth quarter work. It's a lot of ways where Madison can be involved, as we saw earlier in the season. But I'd like to read something. I hope someone will ask, what the situation is there, or somebody will report it. But I don't want to trust it if I don't have to.
Yep. 30% rostered, Zamir White, not a bad player to stash if you're desperate for running back help. And Jonnu Smith is like a mid-range number 2, 15th, 16th-ish in the rankings. And I already said start Brock Bowers. Dolphins DST is in play this week. You can start them. We like them this week. All right, that is it for fantasy football today. This is your AFC home games. We'll give you the NFC home games tomorrow, and we'll recap what's hopefully going to be a really exciting Thursday night. We'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today.